I happened to look at there was a bulletin board there, and had a little, section for jobs available. And I saw this little ditty for a job in Garberville at public health, and I had no idea what it was. I'm like, well, I don't know what that does, but I just, for some reason, decided that, I knew what it was. I was feeling like I needed to make more money. I had divorced my first husband, and I was a single parent, and my mom had died, and things were just getting more expensive. So I felt like I needed to make a little more money, and so I was working 15 hours a week at school, which always turned into more. But so this job was for 18.75 hours a week, and I'm like, well, hey, that's about 40 hours. A lot of people work 40-hour jobs. You should check this out, thinking I could do both jobs. And so I put in an interest card and whatnot, and I ended up getting this job at public health, and was supposed to be based in Garberville. But when I took the job, by the time I was hired, it was a job that was I became an outreach worker, and it was sort of undefined at that point. But the program was like, we have an outreach worker, and we worked with public health nurses. So our team was public health nurses and outreach workers. And by the time I started, the nurse that had been hired for Garberville had quit. And so when I got the job, and we did orientation in Eureka, and I went up there the first day, and the director was like, we thought you could come to Eureka for training until we get up and running in Garberville again. And I went back the next day, and I said to her, I'm not sure I can do this, because Eureka's really not a destination on my map. Even though, from the time I'd lived here in 1970, we had gone to Eureka probably 3 or 4 times at most during the year, but we always went south. Our family was south, and our family was east, and that was where we went. We went to the Bay Area all the time, and did, stocked up on things, and did our family vacations and stuff like that. So it was a 3-day-a-week job, and the people I met was what kept me going back. By the time fall came, because I started in June, and by the time fall rolled around and school started, which I had made the deal that I was going to work in the mornings at school, and then I could do my 18 hours throughout the week at public health. And I was able to go to Eureka because it was like 2 days on, 1 day off, and then another day going up there. But really, it was the people I met through that job that kept me going back. I mean, the nurses, and our team was for, there had been a grand jury investigation at CWS, and they had found that there was 800 to 1,000 cases a year that didn't meet CWS mandates, so they fell through the cracks, but they were still at risk for abuse and neglect. So they made up this team. It was called the Alternative Response Team, and it was to be intensive home visiting, and they'd have the nurse case managers and then the outreach workers. And like I said, in the very beginning, it was not very defined what we were really doing. We were just showing up cold call at these people's houses. We would meet once a week with CWS and get cases that they felt these families could really use some help. And the parameters were they had to have a kid from 0 to 6 in the beginning. And we just kind of forged ahead. And we were really a team. And I think it worked because we showed up at people's houses, and they saw we're just people, We're not CWS, we're not the man coming, And I started out, I had a few different nurses in the beginning, and I'm trying to think. Well, since the one had quit here, then the nurses from Eureka would come down so we could open cases, and then I could work with the families. And I had one, and then finally somebody did. She actually lived in Ferndale, but she came down and did stuff with me. And then Eventually, Rena Kay, who lived here also in the, in the neighborhood, she took on the nurse part of the job, which was great, because then we had a real team going, and that worked really well for a while. But there were a few things later, I think, that really, one that, they said we couldn't make cold calls anymore. We had to go through this rigmarole, send a letter, try to call, and it just didn't really work as well sometimes to engage families. But and then I think cell phones also did, because when you were just calling somebody on the phone, nobody, before caller ID and all that, it's like, oh, everybody wants to answer the phone. They want to know who's calling them, so you could get your foot in the door a lot. But as cell phones came more prevalent, it was like, oh, who's this calling me? And also, I think another thing that shifted it here was that people started to, it was when the pot market also, like people started to have greenhouses in their front yards, or what, it wasn't like the pot growing wasn't on the back 40 anymore. So people were a lot more leery about having you come to their house or something, because they didn't know, oh, we're just a couple of hippie chicks from here too, So that changed the parameters of the program a little bit, and it just didn't always work as well as it had in the beginning. But I am still in contact with several of the people and the families that I worked with. We've become fast friends, and I think that's true for everyone who worked in that program. There's still people that you're in contact with, and you can see we really did make a difference in these families, Then they changed it to a completely different program, and it was a program they got out of Georgia that, I just don't think in my opinion, it doesn't work as well in Humboldt County as our program did. Evidence-based practice became these buzzwords, and if we had written our program up and sold it for boku bucks like Georgia did, I'm sure we could have done the same thing they did with their program. I thought our program was better, but I endured that job. Marina left a little before I did, and before that they had thrown some other programs in with it and whatnot. So we kept it going for a while and whatnot, but it just looks different now. It was, by the end, public health just really did look different in Garberville a lot. We just didn't have the clientele. They closed down like the immunization clinics and a lot of things that, public health had been really popular here in Garberville for. Didn't exist anymore. So, and I retired in 2017 after, it was about 20 years from the time I'd started. And it was a great job because I met so many great people. And so now we're saying in those early years when I started that job, it was like, Eureka's not a destination on my map. And now it's like, I have all these connections up there. So it kind of brought me to this part of my life, because as our life in the Bay Area faltered, like my kids lived there for a while, so that was another reason to go there. We had our family house there. We had a great house in Berkeley. It was just an amazing house. And after our dad died in 2010, we had that for a few years, and then after that got sold, things really changed, and my kids now are in the Sacramento, Davis area, and so that's been a real change for me the past few years. I was thinking, last March I was supposed to go to the Bay Area for a quilt show, and at that point I hadn't been to the Bay Area in 2 years, which that was pretty amazing, because I always said I could just put my car on 101 and it would take me home, basically, So now it's been 3 years since I've been to the Bay Area, and driving to Sacramento has been a huge change, just a really huge change, because it's another one of those places, not really a destination on my map. But until my daughter moved there, I really hadn't been over there or spent much time over there. And, I remember driving up there in the 70s and the 80s, and there was still like a lot of agriculture going on around Sacramento, and it was kind of like Albuquerque, New Mexico, these places that just like spread out all over and whatnot. But I do miss the Bay Area, but at the same time, especially when our house got sold, it was kind of like come to this rationale, like, it's one thing I've always felt about like all the places I have lived is like we have been in these places when it was the best time to be there. When we moved back to the Bay Area, although it was like the Vietnam riots that we spent a lot of, I was down there then, and the free speech movement and Telegraph Avenue and all that. There was a lot happening. There was a lot going on, and a lot of it felt more cohesive than it does now. I think for the Bay Area especially, it feels to me like just too much humanity and too many cars. At one time, we had a house in Oakland, and we could get from my parents' house in Berkeley, our house there, to our house in Oakland in like 15 minutes maybe or something. And now it's a half hour or something. It's the same drive, but it's just the humanity of it. So not being back there, I can't, just the driving alone. I used to not mind all that. Now I'm getting to the age where it's not, even the driving's not as fun. When we first moved to Berkeley, the first few, for the first 10 years, and even after that, sporadically, my mom and I would every spring drive from Berkeley to Albuquerque to see our friends. And like one year, it's like, because I wasn't going to school and different things like that, and I could get my driver's license in Berkeley, in Albuquerque much earlier than I could in California. So we went out there one spring, and I used my sister's address and got my driver's license because I had been driving without a license for a couple years already, so, and those drives, even driving out of the Bay Area, between, like Pleasanton, Livermore, there was no houses, but now it's really amazing. It's just not the same kind of drive at all. But we did that. My mom and I did that, and then I did that with my first partner quite a few times. And then when Peter and I got together, we flew a lot of times, which is a great way to see what's going on. I miss that because, like when we would fly from the Bay Area back to Garberville all the time, you could really keep track of like what was going on logging and whatnot, like west of Ukiah and all that. And I would be really curious to see how much has changed, because it's been a good 20 years or something since I did too much flying. That all ended about 1990, where I was flying as much. 92 something, so.